Okay. So again, I have the pleasure of introducing fellow Rotarian Molly Kruezman. So Molly is here today to talk about producing a film, more specifically, an independent documentary film. She's currently producing a documentary highlighting the Harmony Project, an arts and service organization based here in Columbus. She's going to tell us what a producer actually does. She's going to dive into the nitty-gritty of filmmaking 101 and tell you how she works to bring a project to life from scratch. Molly has spent the last 22 plus years working in arts and education. She began her film career in Oregon. In the midst of running a wilderness camp that specialized in teaching traditional and primitive wilderness skills, Molly found herself producing and directing her first film. The camp held a caretaker program where a chosen few could spend a year living semi-primitively in the Oregon wilderness. Interestingly, 5 young women applied and no men. And it seemed that many people doubted the feasibility of 5 young women living in the wilderness for an entire year. So Molly decided to show everyone how it was done. She followed their experience on film, and the project Earth Seasoned was born. And so was Molly's career as a documentary filmmaker. She went on to produce a feature film called Phoenix, Oregon, which, fun fact, became the #1 film at the box office during the first week of the pandemic. We'll have to ask Molly about that one. She helped to reopen the historic Tower Theater in Central Oregon and served on the film festival board for the organization Bend Film in Bend, Oregon. She also applied her talents as the volunteer coordinator for the Ashland Independent Film Festival, later moving on as the director of marketing and then the director of operations for the same organization. Molly returned to her hometown of Columbus in 2021. Woohoo! Since then, she has served as director of the first annual Cinema Columbus Film Festival. And in the short few years that she's been back, Molly has established herself as a beacon in the stormy waters for Ohio filmmakers. She has dedicated her time to network with local filmmakers, vendors, and connecting them to allies in the industry. She holds a monthly networking event for local filmmakers that started out with 30 people in June of 2022 and has grown to 229 participants. She is filling a need for filmmakers who want to grow the industry in Columbus to connect and create together. So please welcome Molly Kruezman.
Good gravy. I don't know if I did all that. Maybe I did. First of all, I want to say that this is not a pitch. I want to be very clear about that, but I am going to talk about the documentary film that I'm involved in, so that it gives you examples. So one day you wake up and you say, oh, I have an idea. I need to make a documentary film. And then the next thing you should do is call your therapist immediately and have your head examined. Basically, making a documentary film is like starting a new business every single time. So I'm gonna focus a little bit on the general. I also want to tell you all that I am very confident that the film industry is going to keep growing here in Columbus. And so one of the things that I want to do also, for those of you that may be interested in becoming involved monetarily in films, what are some of the things that you should look for if somebody comes to you with a project? And for our lawyers in the room, you're going to love this, and I'll probably get things wrong, so just raise your hand and correct me. So you start by mapping out the idea. So what happened with me was I was contacted by David from the Harmony Project, and he started telling me about their prison arts program, and I became very fascinated with this. So I ended up going down to the Pickaway Correctional Institution. I like to say now on Wednesdays I go to jail. And I was unsure what I would find when I walked into this room with these 60 guys that are all there. But the one thing I knew for sure was that most of these men would be getting out of jail. And I started thinking about the fact that they will become our neighbors. Their kids might be on our kids' softball teams or our grandkids' softball teams. they might end up working at places where we frequent. So how are we setting them up for success? How, what is being done? Well, the first thing I can tell you is that at that establishment, there is a woman warden. Her name is Rochelle Moore, and she is unbelievable. She has completely changed the energy in that facility. She has brought in a number of outside programs, but she's also humanized a lot of the guys that are in there to the point where even corrections officers are now interacting socially with the incarcerated individuals. And that to me was a really great story to be able to tell. I think one of the things that we also should think about when we think about incarcerated people is that most of them come from generational trauma. They've probably come from families that were very poor and that didn't teach a lot of the social, emotional skills that we're used to learn how to cope with things. So a lot of these guys, easiest thing to do, turn to violence. Worst thing to do, turn to violence. I also want to say that I was very clear that I'm not out to make this film to exonerate anybody from what they've done. They have done what they've done. Some of them have done really bad things. They have been judged. They are serving their time, but also they are going to become members of society again. So the next thing you start doing is you start mapping out a storyboard. And that's just a general idea of how you want this to look. And the other thing that I thought was fascinating, this Harmony project was so interesting to me because I thought, why on earth would a bunch of incarcerated men want to sing in a choir? Like, that makes no sense to me at all. But being in that room every week has completely changed my mind. And I find that it's one of the places where these guys are very vulnerable and open to what they can become. I don't know how many of you know David Brown. He is a very special character. He would completely approve of Mike's shirt today. In fact, if he saw it, he'd probably try to take it. But I also have a lot of respect for him and what he's doing with Harmony and how, he's created this organization that gives back in a lot of ways. So the next thing you wanted to start figuring out is, who is your audience? So for me, I started looking at, okay, so really because I can tell you as somebody who's been in this industry and consults with a lot of filmmakers, the first answer almost everybody says is, oh, my audience is everyone. And I immediately say, okay, go home and do your homework, because everyone is not going to come to your film. And you need to be able to narrow that down. So then you start thinking about, so for me, it was, people with family or friends that are in the prison system, those interested in prison reform and lowering recidivism rates, people who work in the prison system, people in the legal field, educators, mental health practitioners, and choral enthusiasts, and people who are already involved in Harmony. That's a pretty big group already. And if all those people like what we produce, they're certainly going to tell people. So the next thing is you start thinking about, do I want to make a short, which is generally 40 minutes? Do I want to make a feature length, which is generally 90 minutes? Or now the new big thing is called a docu-series, which is generally 3 to 4 installments that are 30 to 40 minutes apiece. We're opting for a docu-series. This adds complexity because each segment needs to be its own little sort of complete movie while having this overarching thing happening. So then you start working on timeline. And as Meredith can tell you, you have your pre-production phase, which is what we are still in. And during that phase, you can't believe how much there is to do. Again, it's like starting a business from scratch. So you're finding an accountant, you're finding a lawyer, you're learning about the Ohio Film Tax Credit, which is like the most fun of adult life. You are starting to pull together, your log line, which is your little, as we all know, your little elevator pitch, what is going to quickly grab somebody's attention. And then you start working on, and let me go back to the legal thing, because this is really fascinating. I've been learning some new things, and you always do with every film. There's some real obvious things, like obviously you want releases from each of the people that will be highlighted. You want group release forms, because again, this is a choral group. Working inside a prison brings a whole other slew of interesting hurdles that we're working on. You need agreements with your crew. You need a depiction release. And these are all pre-production things. So I also am working, I need an agreement with my partner in this, who's Josh Clark, and I need a story release from David, who's the head of Harmony, because otherwise we could get halfway down the road and things would go kaplowy, which is bad. So there's a lot of legal things that you want to make sure you have in place. And again, if any of you are interested at any point in the future in investing in a film, I'd be more than happy to go over the sorts of legal things you should be looking for and making sure that those things are in place. So then you want to start picking your subjects. So we decided on the first segment would be about someone who's in for life. Why would they join this choral group? What did this bring to them? How has this changed their life? Because, and this is another thing, and I'm as guilty of it as anyone. It's really easy to say, oh, they're them. They're different than me. They're bad, they're whatever. Well, as we come to find out, yes, some of them are bad. Some people are in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some people do things out of desperation. There's a whole variety of things. Again, not exonerating them, but it's also not the entire human being. So it's really important to me to show that as well. I also am very cognizant that there are victims out there who could end up seeing this film. So I'm cognizant going through this that I need to be careful, and we need to be careful in the way that we're telling this story. The second person will be somebody who's up for parole, because I think that's an interesting story. Most of us have no idea what that process is like. And then what happens when you are paroled. And then the third person will be somebody that's just coming into this program. And what is that like? And what's the machismo? And what's the, how do they finally allow themselves to be part of this group? Of course, David Brown will be highlighted in all his fabulousness. Rochelle, the warden, will absolutely be highlighted. And then we found a correction officer who works at PCI, and it ends up that her sister is incarcerated in Marysville. So there's an interesting story. You get both sides of it. We're also working on getting approval to be able to talk to the incarcerated people's families, because of course they're all affected by all of this. And then there'll be, various other people. The fourth installment will be, and let me also say, just interestingly, Ohio is #2 behind California for the most arts programs in our prison systems, which is fascinating to me. Now, we have a very high incarceration rate, but we have a pretty relatively low recidivism rate. So this is another thing that I sort of want to investigate as we're going along. What are the things that are helping these people when they leave to be successful? So then comes the fundraising. Woohoo! And there are a number of ways you can go about fundraising. One of the things which a lot of people don't know about, but it is absolutely legal and part of the film practice, that you can get a fiscal sponsor. So my production is an LLC. It's its own separate entity and all of that. We'll have insurances and all those sorts of things. But we have coordinated with Wild Goose Creative as a 501c3. So if people want to donate and get that as a tax write-off, they can do that. Then you start looking at, who are your grantors and all those sorts of things. And then we get to the Ohio Film Tax Credit, which I've been sort of peripherally involved in as it's been coming together. I don't know if all of you know, but our governor is completely crazy about film. Mike DeWine loves film. And he gets really angry when he sees the Georgia peach at the end of movies and doesn't understand why it's not an Ohio Buckeye. And so if I can help make it an Ohio Buckeye, I will. So, then you start filming. We will have a little bit different film schedule than most people because we can only be in the prison 1 day a week. And we were on a Zoom call yesterday with the head of the prison system, with the warden, and with other people because we need a lot of clearance to be able to do this. Also, as you may imagine, sound inside a prison is very interesting. These are concrete walls, linoleum floors. I mean, the sound is not great. So you also really want to find a sound person who has worked in those kinds of environments. Because the thing that I think intuitively, but may not have thought about out loud, is a film can have not great visual, but if it has bad sound, you're done. There's just no going back from that. So we've been very fortunate. I have a friend who works out at Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers has signed on to do the sound for us, which is hooray. So we will be filming. We'll start in February, we'll end in May. Our fourth segment will be the spring concert of the Harmony Project, which is actually going to happen at the Huntington Baseball Park. And we're not sure at this point if we will be able to work to have any of the incarcerated people actually at the park, but if not, we will certainly have a film of them up on screen because they will be learning the same song as the choir. So everybody will sort of, I don't know if any of you have been to a Harmony concert, but that's pretty standard practice. Now, what is incredibly different and has really never been done before last year was because David works at the Marysville Women's, he works at PCI, and he also works at Madison. He got approval to bring guys from both choral groups to the Marysville Women's Prison for them to put on a concert together where their families and some of the public could come. It's the first time this has ever been done. And there were a number of heartwarming stories. I wish I could have been there. And strange also, but there's a lifer at Pickaway who hadn't seen his sister in 15 years, and she's unfortunately at Marysville. So it was the first time they got to see each other was last year, and you can't touch, but they got to see each other and they got to spend time together. And I think, those are the human things that fill my heart about this story. And there's a number of very interesting things around that. So then you got all this footage. It's not really footage anymore, it's digital. So then you start about a 6 to 8 month process of editing. And again, I have been very fortunate. I have a friend who's actually an Academy Award winner, and he has come on as our creative producer. So he's really going to help find the story and help the story to flow and all that kind of stuff. But it takes about 6 to 8 months if you're really hustling to get editing done. I will also say, generally speaking, documentaries are much less expensive the narrative feature films. I'm also helping with a film called Down to the Felt. That has a budget of about $1.5 million. Our budget is 385. Because of course, we're not paying actors, we're not paying, SAG and all that kind of thing. And as another aside, there is a lot of talk in the industry about the fact that if a documentary does do well, do you pay back the people that were in it? Because generally, people that you're highlighting in a documentary, you're not paying. So one of the things that I've already set in motion is that we would give a certain percentage after everything else is paid off to the Harmony Project. Because obviously we can't give money to prisoners, that would be strange. But we'll give it to the Harmony Project to help them, keep helping people. So so then you edit, and then you start the really other next fun thing, which actually I know you all be surprised, but I enjoy, which is taking films around to festivals. Now I can tell you as a filmmaker, everybody thinks on their first film that you're getting into Sundance. You're absolutely sure of it. No one has ever made a film better than the one you've just made, and it's a big reality check. But you come to find that in the festivals that you go to, you're so supported and you're so encouraged, and you get to meet other filmmakers, and it's really, I love it. But I am a wallflower, so there you have it. Then, and again, as you're making a film, you want to be thinking along the way, where do you want this film to live? And so obviously with a docuseries, we're looking at streamers. So we'll be looking at the obvious places, Netflix, HBO, yada, yada. There are some films that they are starting to make for theaters. I know there's a Tom Cruise that's a two-parter. I think there might also be a Kevin Costner that's a two-parter. I'll be very curious to see how that works, where they release the one in like November and then one in December. I don't know. I don't think you could get people to go to theaters like that, but who can say? So that's kind of the long and the short of it. I think, another thing for me that's been really important being back here, and because I realized pretty early on that, and no offense to anybody, but Columbus wasn't real savvy about films and how films are made, and really even about film festivals. I can't tell you when I started Cinema Columbus, how many people said, well, who's it for? I said, well, what do you mean, who's it for? It's for everybody. But if you've never been, you don't know, and you think maybe it's some highbrow thing. I mean, that was the next question was, well, is it all, foreign films with subtitles? I'm like, don't think we have any subtitled films. And then they don't understand what's an independent versus a studio. And I said, well, it could be your next door neighbor making the film, or frankly, the big blockbuster Tar with Cate Blanchett was an independent film with a $40 million budget. And I won't get on my soapbox about making independent film in Columbus, but that's what we should be doing. Okay. So that's when I started bringing filmmakers together, because I wanted us to be able at the grassroots level to start supporting each other. I wanted to start being able, when I got my job, I went out to all the film festivals in the state and met all the executive directors that I could. I came back to Columbus. I met as many of the AV teachers in the high schools as I could. And then I started meeting filmmakers, just to start sort of coagulating and pulling together, this industry here. And then I quickly realized, and for the accountants and the lawyers in the room, there's nobody in Columbus that's doing this particular specialty. So you may want to look into it, just saying. Because I ended up, like, I have a law firm that's in California, because, they're just, so it's something to think about. I don't know. and there was something, Meredith, you mentioned, and you said they'd have to ask me about it. What was that?
Oh, the number one at the box office for
Oh, yeah.
Oregon.
Okay, so this will be my last little bon mot, and then y'all can ask me questions. I've been hanging around David too long. I just said y'all. So when we made the film Phoenix, Oregon, we did the, the whole circuit of taking it around. We found a distributor. It was due to open in 11 theaters across the country. That was the week that the whole world shut down. Our team got back together, and we decided that we would show it online, and that whatever money we made, we would split it out with the box offices, with the theaters where we were supposed to be. And because we were the only film in the country that did that, for 1 week, we were number one at the box office. Someday I'm gonna be on Jeopardy, by golly. So yes, that's my little fun story. I know there's a lot more that I should tell you. I will also say, I've been advocating when I have a chance to talk to people at the State House to say, the thing about film that, again, most people don't understand, and Scott, you'll love this analogy because I use it all the time. People don't understand how many jobs are created on a film set. And so I've been trying to get people onto film sets so they can see, even for a commercial or a short film, and these are living wage jobs. But as I say to people, when Honda wants something to happen for them, they don't go over to Roush and show you a Civic, they take you to the plant. And so that's one of the things that I think needs to keep happening, so that we're showing legislators that these are jobs. This is job security. I don't know if y'all know, again, y'all, what good gravy. I'm gonna have to go back to school. But Denison University graduates more screenwriters that end up in LA, in Hollywood, than any other college in the country. So we have incredibly good film education at almost every university around Columbus. So we're raising kids here, we're putting them through school. Many of them go to college in this area, and then they're leaving because there aren't jobs in that industry. So again, there you are, I'm on my soapbox, but I think we're going to turn the tide. What do you think, Meredith?
I hope so.
Okay, me too. All right, so with that, I'm done, and you can ask me questions. Yes.
Would it be possible for some of the singers who have good voices to form a little quartet or something and be able to leave prison and have a job performing? Is that like legal, illegal? I don't know.
Well, if once they're paroled, of course, we can't just, but the thing of it is, I will say also that David is, he works really hard for anybody that's paroled, that they join the Harmony Project, or they're at least somehow involved. Now, it depends. There's a lot of stipulations depending on what you've done, so all those things have to be taken into consideration. But I don't know if any of you were at the performance at the Ohio Theater, but they had a guy who had been paroled, who's an incredible singer, and he did a solo, and he was really amazing. So I think, one of the biggest things that I think about, and this is a great point, is again, with the social emotional learning, they learn how to work together in a group. They learn how to resolve differences in a nonviolent way. It seems to us, because we had people, mirroring that for us or teaching us these skills, it's like, well, duh, that's obvious, but not everybody has that, and it's easy to forget. So, but there are guys that still, and women, who still keep singing with the Harmony Project. And the beauty of the Harmony Project, I don't know if you guys know this, but you don't even really have to be able to sing, because they have 500 members. You can pretty much just mouth the words, you can sing off key, and nobody's going to be the wiser. So it's a lot of fun. Yes.
I'm a member of the Harmony Project, and I can't sing, so two questions. One, you mentioned it's several months to get the production finished and edited. So when will this, when will this film be finished? And number one, and number two, where would we be able to see it?
So the hope is that this would be finished, I would say, in a year and a half. By the time everything's all said and done and we do a festival run, if we do a festival run, because again, it's a 4-part, so I'm not sure how that would work. I would, of course, I mean, please, do you think you could keep me quiet about where you could watch it? I will be sure to tell you, but also, again, our hope is that it would be streaming on one of the major platforms, so you'd be able to watch it there.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
I was a political prisoner. When you talked about prison, all the picture came to my mind. So what you're doing, what you're interviewing is like prisoners who did some crime or something wrong in the society. Have you thought of getting into political prisoners, asking the university students, innocent ones, who were trying to be voiced, but their voice cut short and they're in prison, or CEOs who are challenging the government, amazing CEOs are just being captive in the prison. Have you ever thought of interviewing them and be voice for them?
So the thing I will tell you is my hope is with this 4-part docuseries that it will be well enough received that we can start going down other avenues and possibly turn it into a series. Because I think there's all kinds of stories like that. There's a lot of people that are wrongly incarcerated, not a lot. There are people that are wrongly incarcerated. There absolutely are political prisoners. There's a whole conundrum now that's very fascinating to me because, marijuana for the most part has been legalized, but you still have all these people that are in prison for it. Well, how, there's fascinating questions around all of this. I have people asking me, how I feel about the death sentence and I think there's infinite stories. For right now, we're focused, and it's hard, but we have to stay focused in to make the first one well enough, because what we need to do is be able to have you care about somebody who's in prison for life, or care about somebody who's committed a crime, a serious crime, but to start thinking about them differently. And so that's why we're going to focus each segment on a person while telling other stories. But I would love going forward to have the ability for this to expand and to look into these other stories and what is happening. Again, I had lunch with my lawyer friend over there the other day, and we talked about some of this. My hope is that I'll get to spend time with people at the Bar Association, with, professors at Ohio State, that kind of thing, and Capitol. And, there's a lot of work for me left to do. But yeah, I'd love to be able to tell those stories because those are critically important. If you just get caught on the wrong side at the wrong time, that's it, right? So,
In the wrong place in Africa.
yep, exactly.
There's no speech of freedom of speech.
Yes, exactly. No, it's exactly true. Yeah, so thank you for that question. Anybody else? All right, then, I'm gonna go.